Welcome to the It's Time podcast with your host, Professor Dale Feinauer, from the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs.
Welcome to the It's Time podcast, an offering of the UW-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs. Once again, we're here at A.J. Armstrong Studios to help throw a little fuel on the flame of your desire to enhance your business management and leadership skills. Today, we have Bobbie Collies with us. Bobbie, would you tell us a little bit about yourself? But let's start with, where do you work and what's your role in the organization?
So I work at Grange Insurance out of Columbus, Ohio, as our headquarters. And my current role is Vice President of Strategic Distribution.
Go on. What does Vice President of Strategic Distribution mean?
Well, it was a newly created vertical, Dale, 2 years ago within the sales and marketing department. And really what we're trying to do is look over the horizon for distribution and insurance. So my team really has two pillars. One is focused on strategic account management. So looking at the largest agencies across the country and understanding what their strategies are and figuring out where we want to align and maybe where we don't want to align.
Okay.
And then the second pillar is on emerging distribution. And that's really, where does technology intersect with the independent agency channel? And how do we enable our agents to continue to remain relevant as the industry changes so quickly?
Very good. Now, let's get to telling about you. Tell me about you. How did you get to become the leader you are today? Tell me about your life.
Well, so I'll give you a plug quick. I got my bachelor's degree from UW-Oshkosh, and you were a professor of mine. So I had a very good foundation.
Thank you. That's very kind of you. I will pay you later for that compliment.
of a college education. But I think, I was very fortunate very early in my career to have leaders within the companies that I work for recognize my potential and give me access to things like strategic discussions and professional development opportunities early on in my career. And so I think I was just given a lot of tools and resources, and I feel very fortunate for the folks that supported my growth as an early business professional.
Were there any particular leaders that you were exposed to early in your career that you'd identify and say, yeah, I learned some stuff from their leadership style?
Yeah, I'll give a call out to Bill Reeves. So he was a executive at Society Insurance when I was an underwriter. And he really saw my potential, right, as a leader. So he saw me as a leader on the floor. He put me into training programs and really gave me the opportunity and set the stage for my success by exposing me to strategic discussions, and then also helping me build plans, right, on how do we actually execute and get results.
What do you think it was? Young people are often, I'd like to get mentors. I'd like to get people to help make those kind of investments in me. What do you think he saw in you that he said, this is one worth putting some investment in?
Well, I would describe myself as having a truly entrepreneurial spirit. So any company I work for, I'm not really satisfied with what we're doing today, right? Like I can see over the horizon and say, hey, like what if we thought about doing it this way? Or I think we could make it better if maybe we made a few tweaks over here. And so some leaders that you work for, and I've learned a lot from bad leaders that I've worked for as well as really great ones. But one of the things that Bill did for me is he really said, okay, I'm going to just set the stage for your success. So what are your hurdles to getting this done? And what can I clear for you? And how can I support you? Right. And so I think just having someone who will not only give you the professional development opportunities, right, to just grow technically as a business professional and a leader, but also just being open to helping support you in the ways that you need, right? So he saw the strengths in me and focused more on my strengths versus my weaknesses and really pushed me to be better. Yes.
You had mentioned that you've also probably learned from some less than optimal leaders that you have been exposed to. I assume we will not shout out names on this one. But what have you learned from a leader that, no, that's not the way I want to lead?
Yeah, I can think of a few in my career. I would say that they had big egos and their idea was the only idea, right? And so as a leader myself, those were situations where I learned not only what not to do, but then also learned how do you create a situation where you make that person think that your idea is their idea, because that's the only way you're going to get things done.
All right, let's hit both of those. So managing up, not uncommon that you are looking to manage up and get the boss to think this is their idea, because otherwise it didn't go anywhere. How do you do that?
Well, I think there's a few things. Number one, establishing trust, right? So just knowing that you have their back is very important. But then also the credibility piece and gaining allies. I will be the first to say I hate the political game. Like I absolutely loathe it. It's probably my biggest derailer as a leader myself. But what I will say is you really need to figure out how do you navigate an organization and where there are alliances and where there aren't, right? And so making sure that you understand how the dynamics of a leadership team work can really play in your favor, and just how do you get things done, right? Okay.
The other piece of that you noted was then how do you create an environment where other people can do the flip and can challenge you, and it doesn't have to be their idea. How do you create that environment where the people that are following you are, oh, it doesn't have to be Bobbie's idea?
Yeah, so I think my biggest piece, and I think a lot of leaders struggle with this, is being as vulnerable with your team as you possibly can, and letting them know what your weaknesses are and where your strengths are.
And you're willing to own, hey, I got some weaknesses.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. And I often am very intentional about just saying, hey guys, this is an idea I have. Like, red team me. And when I say red team me, poke holes in it. Tell me what I'm not thinking about. Because I only have that one perspective, is Bobbie's perspective, right? But there's 5 other people at the table who have seen different things in their career, and they might be seeing different things in the market that I don't even see. So you just have to almost set the stage to allow for people's ideas to flow freely without any critical reviews of what they're saying to you, right?
So you specifically ask for critique of an idea that you throw out there.
Yeah. Like, hey guys, this is the idea I have. What am I not thinking about? What could go wrong? What's the worst thing that could go?
So you not only invite feedback, but you encourage feedback of how could this be a dumb idea?
Yeah. Am I crazy? Am I crazy for thinking this?
This may be a great idea or might be stupid. Help me figure out which it is.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting. And how does that impact your staff?
My teams, and I've built, I would say 5 or 6 teams over the years in my career with my position changes. And I do feel like the dynamics within those teams have been just fantastic. And there's just this, I'm trying to look for words, Dale. And I hate buzzwords, but there's just this synergy, and I hate that word too, but I can't find a different word. But there's just this synergy that comes to light when people feel like they're in a safe space, right? So really creating that safe space and being vulnerable, I think really maximizes the potential of the team, because everybody is given the permission to come up with ideas that might be bad, but also they're given the permission to critique ideas, right? So people, the ideation and the innovation that comes out of those types of teams is amazing, because there's things that you harvest when you allow people to be vulnerable and they're comfortable being vulnerable that you would never get to an environment with like an autocratic leader with a big ego. And that's been something I've been trying to be very intentional about, is the other buzzword, servant leadership, right? But how do I best set the stage for success and the success of not only my team, but my organization and the folks that we work with, whether that's internally or externally?
If I heard it right, it's safety and it's vulnerability. But if I heard this right, it's both you're sharing your own vulnerability, but creating that safe environment where other people can also be vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's both of those that you find leads to the synergy of being able to generate and critique ideas.
Yeah. And our organization stood up an innovation team about 3 or 4 years ago. And one of the things that we had to do was give people permission to think outside the box, because they're so used to thinking inside the box. So we started doing like brain exercises, right, to get people to think differently And that's been something that even just opening up an ideation session with a team has been very beneficial, because folks tend to just swim in their lane. Right. And you almost have to train the brain to think differently. And even though it's a safe space, how do you get people to think outside of the little insurance box we've been living in forever?
The old school thinking was that you put really bright people who've had amazing professors who you put in these high-level positions. They're the geniuses. They're in charge. They make the decisions. What's wrong with that? Why shouldn't you just be making all the decisions? Obviously, you're smart, creative. You've been promoted.
From a leadership perspective, Dale, I believe that the best ideas come from the people who are actually working in the trenches. And so my job is to be able to look over the horizon and say, hey, guys, these are the trends I'm seeing. Or, hey, I think, the industry might be going in slightly over in this direction, but how are we as an organization going to react to that? Or what ideas do you have on how we can make sure that we remain relevant as we see, the digital world kind of insert itself into the insurance world?
Very good.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
We're talking about managers that you learn from in terms of what not to do. You identified not having such a big ego that everything has to be yours. Any other lessons you took away from suboptimal leaders?
Yeah, well, I think there's other leaders too that I've worked for that just haven't been confident, right? And maybe were put in positions where they earned it because of maybe their technical skills, but not necessarily their leadership skills. And those have been really difficult situations to be in as well, right? Because as I'm trying to set the stage for success for my teams, right, it's how do I help manage up to those leaders, right, so they can help set the stage for success too as I'm doing it. So the managing up, I think, has been the most difficult piece of growing as a leader in any organization that I've been in.
Fascinatingly, I think you've just identified two problems that leaders can have. And one's having too much ego, everything has to be their idea, and too little ego and a lack of self-confidence.
Yeah.
How do you identify where you are on those? How do you balance those two? Sounds like you...
It's a fine art. I don't even know if I can explain this in words. I think just being very true to understanding what is the mission and vision of the company that you're working for, and the core values of the company. If you can identify with all of those and really have the best interests of mind of the organization that you're working for, not the best interests of Bobbie, I think that takes away a lot of the ego piece. But then also having the confidence and the credibility within the organization to be able to set the stage for success for those people that you work for. And quite frankly, for anybody who has a really great idea, who could bring top line or bottom line results to the organization.
Interesting. Cool. I think you expressed it in words.
Yeah, I hope so.
What was your first leadership role?
My first leadership role was an underwriting manager at Society Insurance. I think I had a team of 6 direct reports, and I was transitioning out of being their peer on their team into a leadership role.
So you had been a peer. You're a female. You were how old? You're not supposed to ask women how old they are. You were how old?
Not quite 30.
Not quite 30. So you're young, female, had been a peer, and now you're their leader.
Yes.
Generally in our society, unfortunately, those are not things that tend to make it easier to be a leader.
Yes.
How'd you do it?
I had, at that point in time, I had a female leader myself, which you might be interviewing on one of your podcasts, Holly Lifke.
We have interviewed Holly.
Yes. So she did a really good job, I think, of helping me understand how the dynamics are different for women than men in leadership. The peer to manager, it was an easier transition than I thought it was going to be, Dale. And I think it's mostly because within the team itself, I kind of took on that natural leadership role before taking on the management role. I'm not going to say it didn't come without challenges, because
right.
Every new team comes with challenges. But I think in that case, I got some good technical training on becoming a new manager from an organization called MRA.
Sure.
And then I had a really good leader to help me walk through it in Holly.
We'll cycle back to the woman, the female side. one of the things in leadership is trying to balance having a relationship with your direct reports with not being too much the buddy, the friend. That can be particularly complicated when you've been a peer. How do you balance that question of, are you their friend or are you their leader?
So I've always tried to take this this point of view where I just put on a hat. I'll be like, oh, today I'm talking to you as your leader. These are the expectations I need to set, or if it's a critical conversation. But then I'll also say, right now I'm talking to you as a friend, not your leader, right? And here's some advice I have for you. So having those clear boundaries, I think, ahead of conversations has really helped, particularly in those situations where I was their peer and went to their leader, or it's someone from the industry that I've been friends with for a long time and I want to recruit them on my team and I bring them in and they were a friend before I became their leader.
Right. And so you'll articulate, hey, at this point, I'm having a conversation with you as a friend.
Yes.
This is a conversation as a leader.
Yes.
Understand which hat I've got on.
Yes. Yes. And that's worked pretty well. I'm not going to say that doesn't come with challenges either, having friends report to you. But I feel like I've managed it well enough to make it be effective.
And now a few words about some of the programs and services offered by the UW-Oshkosh College of Business.
Powerfully positioned, strategically designed, results driven. That's what sets the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Master of Business Administration program apart in Northeast Wisconsin. Our MBA professional program offers flexible course options to meet the needs of working professionals seeking career advancement. Take the courses 100% online, in person during the evenings in Appleton or Oshkosh, or a combination of both, and earn your MBA in as little as 2 years. No GRE or GMAT required. It's time to achieve more with a graduate degree from UW-Oshkosh. Visit uwo.sh/MBA to learn more. That's uwo.sh/MBA. Visit today.
What did you learn from that leadership role, that first leadership role?
A lot of things. I think, to your point a little bit earlier, gaining credibility and respect as a young female leader was difficult, especially when you have folks on your team that are, no offense, middle-aged white guys.
Hey, as long as you're not calling me an old white guy, I'm taking middle-aged white guy as a compliment. Thank you, Bobbie.
That was quite a while ago. So things have changed, I think, for even women in leadership over the last decade and a half, which has been fun to see. But there were some challenges there because there wasn't a lot of respect and credibility. So Holly worked with me a lot on how to approach some of those conversations. And quite frankly, even today, as a female leader, there are certain situations where I know that an idea might be better heard from a male, which is super unfortunate. But and I'll plant seeds and I'll be like, hey, will you bring up this idea in the meeting and I'll support you. But I think the idea might be better received coming from you than from me, and it would be best for the organization if we did it this way.
And obviously hugely unfortunate that in our society, gender still makes a doggone bit of difference in these kind of things. But literally, you will have an idea and you'll think, if this will sell better coming from a guy.
Yeah. So
you pass it to a guy and let them lead it and to some extent get the credit for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't that aggravate the heck out of you? Don't you just want to scream?
It used to, Dale. It used to. Like as a young, like that, my emotional intelligence has really grown in that situation over time because when I was young, I would just push. I would push those ideas into these meetings. I'd be like, this is what we need to do. Like, come on, guys. Like, can't you hear me?
And turned out sometimes they couldn't hear you.
Yeah. Well, or they would hear me, but for whatever reason, and there's plenty of studies. I mean, you guys, you know the case studies, right? That's, we all have these biases, these unconscious biases. And you just, at some point, you just have to figure out how do you get stuff done, right? For the good of the company and for the good of your team.
Okay.
Yeah.
Other funks in terms of the challenges that are unique being a female woman leader in America today?
I do believe that we've come a long way, and I'm fortunate to work for a company that has more females than males on their board. And I'm doing the counts in my head, and more females than males on our senior leadership team at this point in time.
Those are both the exception to the rule.
Yeah. So I think that's a really great start, right? It's just, elevating women into roles where they can have a bigger impact on the strategy and the execution of the organization. But what happens in practice is still those unconscious biases come through. And
sadly.
Yes. And I think we're starting to do a better job of educating each other on that. And I think the diversity and inclusion push over the last couple of years is really kind of pushed more people to think about those biases that exist. But I think we just need to figure out, how do we train our brains, or at least pause, which is difficult because we're all moving so fast. How do we stop and pause and say, hey, are any biases potentially impacting this decision that I'm making right now? And I don't know that we do that intentionally enough as leaders. I really don't.
How do you think the staff around you would describe your leadership style?
Bold. I'm probably a little bold. I'm not afraid to challenge the status quo, but inclusive, definitely collaborative, and energetic. Everybody that I've worked for, or even people that mentor me, just tell me, like, you just bring a lot of energy to a room, a lot of passion with what you do. And so I think out of all of that energy and passion comes the care. And I just read an article about just leading with love, which feels icky, being in a corporate world and saying you should love your employees. But we're in a really awkward and weird situation where, how do we, as a company, or, retain employees and create a culture that people feel connected to when we're working in hybrid worlds, or we have a ton of remote workers. And so I think that article hit me in a different way, because in the past it was, Google has slides and they have, ping pong tables and so has, beer 30 every Friday where they're having happy hour with their employees. But that's kind of stuff, that connectedness isn't happening anymore. But I think what people are really looking for is, what is that true belonging, and how do I feel connected to an organization? It's just not a job, just not tasks. And then on top of that, we've talked a lot about emotional intelligence and how that EQ trumps IQ, right, in leadership. Personally, for me, EQ has been very difficult, looking at a bunch of heads on a Zoom screen every single day.
Right.
It's harder to read a room. It's harder to exercise that emotional intelligence. So I think that's a really big obstacle for us as leaders moving forward, is if we're going to have truly more of a remote or hybrid workspace, how do we figure out the tools we need to exercise emotional intelligence, and then also the connectedness of our teams and that love.
Okay. And so the inclusivity, the caring, the EQ, maybe a particular challenge in the remote environment, but that's one of the really important parts of you as a leader. Yeah.
I think I will agree with every single article and study that's been done on emotional intelligence and how it impacts someone's effectiveness as a leader, and the effectiveness of the organization if the leadership teams have high EQ.
So I'm hearing, agree with the assessment that for someone who is aspiring to move up in leadership ranks, thinking about EQ, enhancing their EQ is one of the most important things they could do?
Absolutely.
Cool.
Absolutely. And my challenge right now is, my EQ scores have evolved to be better over time as a leader. But I know personally that my EQ drops significantly when I'm on a Zoom screen versus in a room. And I'm trying to figure out two things: the why, and then how to solve for that. And I've talked to many other leaders about this, and I feel like everybody has this challenge. So Dale, if the college has any great tools for us, we'd love to have them out here.
Well, I'll work on that. But any takeaways you've had already in terms of how to maintain EQ in the Zoom Teams environment, remote?
I think one is focus, right? So I think it's harder to feel the energy of a meeting when I'm on Zoom. So I'm looking at everybody's faces, but I think everyone on that Zoom screen is probably 60 to 70% focused, versus in a room, they might be more like 90% focused.
Right.
So I think number one, we have to solve for, how do we pull everybody in so everybody's present and focused within the meeting and not distracted by the side chats or the text messages or the email that they have up on their second screen. And then once we can solve for the focus piece, then I think that's when we can start saying, okay, how can I start to read the dynamics of this meeting and bring EQ into the conversation that we're having now. Because it feels like it's been a lot more task and business orientated.
Yes.
Yes. And which I think is also creating bigger silos within organizations today, and which is maybe another problem we need to add to the list of virtual remote work environments is the silos.
The silos.
Yeah.
The remote is a fascinating challenge, particularly in sort of orienting new people, bring new people in the organization. One of my sons started a job not long ago when I was asking about that challenge, and he noted that the flip side is that you see people in environments you otherwise wouldn't. I got to stop this meeting because I'm going to go make lunch for my kid because they're homesick, and the cat walks across the screen, and etc.
Yeah.
In the Zoom Teams environment, how much are you focused on this needs to be very business-like, and how much is it okay for the cat to walk across the screen?
Yeah, like the cat walking across the screen, the kid peeking in and waving quick. Those are all really fun moments.
Those are okay.
I think they're okay, right? They're real, right? And we talked earlier about being vulnerable, like being real is being vulnerable. And we're making a concerted effort to try to have, the 5 minutes of small talk before we start the actual business meeting, and having a very clear agenda before we walk into a meeting so we know what we want to accomplish. And our organization even we're trying to build this culture playbook. So we just put in some meeting etiquette so we can have actual breaks between Zoom meetings. So it's not back to back to back every half an hour on the hour and people feeling guilty if they're walking in late, right? Bio breaks, snacks, lunches. So we're trying to intentionally force some more, some rules of engagement, right? In a virtual world that we didn't necessarily need to have when we were in the office together.
Okay. One of the other aspects, in addition to the inclusivity and the caring, was energetic.
Yeah.
Talk to me about being energetic as a leader.
I don't know that I see it in myself as much as other people see it in me.
You really don't.
I can sometimes feel it, but I don't know that I see it as much as other people see it. And I've been given this feedback when I've started with new teams, 3-6 months in, or 360 after a year or something, and it's just like, you just bring so much energy to the team. I'm like, really? Like, that's cool. Like, I'm excited about that. But I don't know that it's not intentional. I think it just might be who I am. Right?
Well, I can believe it's who you are. When I thought about you doing one of these podcasts, this is going to be cool. And I thought, she's very energetic. This is going to be easy.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, good.
That's interesting.
Did you think the same thing about me as a student?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, sure.
So,
you were bouncing off the walls then.
It's innate.
And so you are just energetic as leader because Bobbie's energetic.
Yeah.
Is that a plus for you as a leader? Is it something you have to control in any ways?
Yeah.
How's that play into leadership?
I think overall it's a positive. I've also been given feedback at times I can be intimidating, and I think it's just the energy coming through. Like, I'm just so excited about something, or I'm really passionate about something, that I think it's just sometimes people are overwhelmed because I'm just, I just come at them.
I understand.
Yeah. And so I think my EQs help me with that over time, being able just to recognize if someone's like, whoa, like, ooh.
Maybe Bobbie needs to take it down a notch.
She just needs to settle down a little bit. But then you see people lean in too sometimes, right? When the energy's there. So I think that I'm going to go back to the EQ, Dale. Like, it's probably one of the most important pieces as a leader that I've intentionally focused development on over the years.
It's the EQ side.
Yeah.
Yep. And one of our podcasts is focused on EQ. Bold is one of the other aspects of you as a leader. Talk to me about being a bold leader.
I've never been afraid just to say, hey, to challenge the status quo. And I think one of the things that people both appreciate, and I probably drive some folks nuts, is what we're doing today isn't good enough, because I'm more of like, I don't want to be just good. Like, I want our team to be great and I want us to win. It might be a little bit of the competitiveness in me. But just thinking outside the box and thinking differently, which is probably why I'm in the role that I'm in today.
Right.
Is because how do we look over the horizon and try to predict where things are going, and then build a strategy on how do we get there. And quite frankly, in today's world, it's going to take bold. So
being bold is a good thing as a leader. It's a important part of who you are.
Yeah.
Are there downsides to being bold as a leader?
Well, this is where you have to build a good team, because there needs to be someone probably a little bit more pragmatic sitting at the same table as I am as we're making business decisions to say, yeah, Bobbie, that's a great idea, but maybe not now. Or red team it. Well, have you thought about this? Right? Because I get really excited about new things and trying new things. And so there needs to be someone on my team who can help balance the bold and Bobbie.
So you're bold, you're energetic, you can be intimidating, and yet there are people on your team who are willing to, at some level, look you dead in the eye and say,
yeah,
we think you're missing some things. We think you're getting a little too headstrong.
Yeah.
Really? How did they do that without being afraid that they're going to get killed?
Well, I think it goes back to creating that safe space. I'm asking for it, right?
Okay.
I'm genuinely asking, like, hey, like, tell me if I'm crazy, but this is where I'm going.
So you lead with the
yes,
being vulnerable yourself. Hey,
yeah.
It's okay if you think I'm crazy. You can say that.
Yeah. Or here's an idea. Or what do you think if we went in this direction? What could go wrong? Talk to me about the pros and cons.
So you're really inviting that.
Yes.
Okay.
And you almost have to as a leader.
Particularly when you're bold and energetic.
Yeah. Because otherwise you're just not going to get the feedback that you need. And if you don't get that feedback, you'll probably step in it.
And now a few words about some of the programs and services offered by the UW-Oshkosh College of Business.
The Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh is focused on solving tomorrow's problems today. Corporations and other businesses in Northeast Wisconsin can utilize the center for threat analysis, incident response assistance, cybersecurity awareness and training programs, and professional development for technical and other staff. Learn more about the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh Cybersecurity Center of Excellence at uwo.sh/cybersecurity. That's uwo.sh/cybersecurity.
You think you were a born leader?
To some degree, yeah. I look back at just even, neighborhood, childhood playtime, and I'd be like, yeah, we're going to get together and we're going to play this game. Right. And then but I also coordinate. I'm very good at coordinating social events too, Dale. Like it's just leading, bringing people together. I'm also an extreme extrovert. If you haven't been able to tell, yeah.
Shocked, I say. All right. So you're a natural leader. Do you think you could be developed into a leader even if you're not a born leader? If there are people out there thinking, I'd like to be in leadership, but I don't think I'm a born leader. I didn't coordinate stuff when I was a kid.
Well, I think you truly have to want it, right? So if you don't feel like you're born a leader, I think there are tools and resources out there for you to become a person who could lead, but you have to have the confidence to do it, and you have to really want it in your gut. And I think if you have the will, there's ways. There's absolutely ways to.
So you don't have to be a born leader.
I don't think so.
You can develop the skills.
I don't. Yeah, I think so. And I think I was a born leader, or maybe had those innate qualities because I was so social and I just wanted to bring people together. But that doesn't automatically make you a great leader, right? And so I stepped in a few times early in my career, right? Because I didn't have probably the emotional intelligence or the experience that I needed to, or pushed a little bit too hard with some of those ideas without getting enough feedback first.
Right.
And then ended up in a situation that wasn't awesome, right? But it's live and learn. And that's one of the things I try to tell my teams is if something doesn't work, it's okay. Like we learn from it and it's not a failure, right? Like let's just learn from it and move on and make sure we don't make the same mistake again. Yeah.
It's okay to make a mistake, just not the same mistake over and over.
Yeah, because that's insanity.
Yes. It sounds like, correct me if I'm wrong, that self-reflection, some level of self-awareness is an important part of developing as a leader.
Yeah, the self-awareness piece is big. And when I'll go back to my society days when I talk about having like the tools and the resources available at an early age as a leader. Like I got a Hogan personality test assessment done very early in my career, which brought to light some things that I knew about myself, but really didn't know about myself until it was on paper in front of me. And through that process, I worked with Right Management, which is in the Valley too.
Yep. Great organization.
Yeah. Lisa was my leadership coach. We put together some really great, development plans on how do you work on your derailers and also enhance your strengths. And so that was a really great exercise for me. And that was early 30s, right? So I'm super fortunate and lucky that I got exposure to that stuff early.
And you've kind of bounced into some of this, but do you think of leadership as more an art or a science?
Yes.
Go on.
Yes. I think that there are pieces of it that are scientific, right? So as we just talked about, you have innate qualities. And if you can actually harvest those, so if you think of Myers-Briggs or any other personality assessment, understanding who you are is true. Like, and you're going to fall back into those under stress. So understand what your derailers are, what your behaviors are naturally. So then that brings you to the art. So you know who you are, but then how do you massage those pieces of who you are to be the best leader you can for the team that you're in? And that could be a little bit different depending on the situation of both the organization, the maturity of your team. You might massage it differently. And that's where the art of leadership comes in my opinion.
You're obviously very busy. You've got a lot of irons in the fire. You're well up the organizational food chain. I'm assuming you don't spend a lot of the day bored trying to figure out what you could possibly do with your time. How do you find time to take care of you? How important is self-care in the mix of things you need to do as a successful leader?
Well, that's the foundation, right?
Go on.
So it takes time to learn, I think, what are the things you need to do as a grown adult to make sure that you're supporting yourself the best way you can with self-care. So there are things I know I need to do to keep myself sane. One of them is regular exercise. I choose running right now because my body still allows me to do that. And then you just trying to fill myself with food that's, good fuel and not garbage. But that's the foundation to all of that other stuff. So if I'm not eating well, if I'm not making time to exercise, my ability to be focused and be on my A game as a leader isn't there either. So when that stuff fails, then my leadership isn't as great.
So being good at exercise and diet are important leadership skills.
Absolutely. Take care of your body first, right? Because that fuels your brain too.
Okay. Exercise, diet, I'm guessing sleep?
Sleep. Yes. And to some degree, I'm not going to push meditation on folks, but just taking time to self-reflect and taking moments of time where you just, I clear my brain. I just take time where I just don't think about anything for a little while. Most of the time that's when I'm running. So I can do that while I'm running and just clear everything out and just think about nothing but what I'm seeing and what my body's doing. But those moments of pause and allowing yourself to shut off actually, I think, help fuel your performance later.
I agree. And I'm old enough that the running isn't really an option, but swimming is. And I think of that time when it's just me and the black line on the bottom of the pool.
Yeah.
And it's great self-reflection, introspection, time for yourself. And I am a fan of meditating. So, I think that does relate to EQ. That ability to control your own emotional state.
Mm-hmm.
How do you do that? How do you control your emotional state? Walking into a meeting and not being overly on or not being overly down. How do you do that?
I think it's just anticipating, right? So a little bit is I know what to anticipate going into a meeting and mentally preparing for how you're going to react. I can't say that I do it well all the time. So in the situations, you can feel your body being emotionally hijacked, right? So I'm getting I'm not agreeing with what this person's saying, or they're being overly critical and I'm getting a little uncomfortable. Many times I'll just try to walk away from the situation and divert that conversation for a later time, because we all know if we sleep on it, we wake up the next day, it's a little bit less emotional. It might take 2 or 3 days if it's a really heated situation. But I think knowing your body and being able to pause and say, hey, you know what, I think we should just table this and talk about this next week. I appreciate your feedback and we'll wrap back around. Those are really good ways to exercise EQ, even though you're not being stable in the moment.
Because you're going to recycle it back to when you can be stable in the moment.
Yes.
Mentors. From what you've said, I think it's important for folks to have mentors. Advice for young folks that are new in leadership and are looking to acquire mentors. How does someone do that? How do you manage the relationship with a mentor?
Yeah. So my boss right now, Jill Wagner-Kelly, one of the things that she talks about is having a personal board of directors. which I love. I just love the concept.
Interesting concept. I've not heard that before.
It makes perfect sense. And so I think mentorship's really important, but having a mix of mentors is also important. And that comes into the thought process around diversity of thought, right? And having different levels of care from the people within your personal board of directors. Like, one might be a close friend. One might be, a colleague or a peer. One might be, for me, like just a woman leader in a different industry, right? Just to get a different perspective and starting to seek those out. Finding them can be difficult. I think use your resources wisely. Bill Reeves, one of my early leaders, said, use every resource available to you, Bobbie. Every resource available to you. Take advantage of every single one. And so when you think about your network and the folks that you're seeking, right, for mentorship, trying to say, okay, these are the goals that I have for myself, and talking to people that might have access to those types of leaders and saying, who would you suggest I talk to as a mentor?
And so you're building the network A to B to C kind of thing.
Yes.
What's the hardest part about being a leader?
The hardest part about being a leader, in my opinion, is the thought of failing the folks that you work for. I think I worry about, am I setting them up for success and developing them in the best ways that I possibly can? And so if I'm ever find myself in a situation where I don't think that I'm capable of doing that for the team, I feel like I probably have to step away and go look for a new role. Just because that's what's most important to me in my heart.
Is this the flip side of being authentic? That it's good to be authentic, but the downside of being authentic is you're going to worry about whether you really are the right person and caring enough?
Yeah, I think so, to some degree. And this, I've found myself, Dale, in organizations where I think my values align really strongly, and then organizations where the value alignment wasn't quite there, and that impacted my leadership, right? And so I think even if you think through, what are your personal values? What do you value most in a culture, in the folks that you work with? The best success that I've had as a leader and the most fun I've had in my career are those roles where I feel like the value alignment is there. And that's the same in your personal relationships too, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Talk to me about that alignment. The alignment of the values that you have, that an organization has. How do you know going into a job where there's going to be that kind of alignment?
I think just asking a lot of questions about the culture and the political environment will give you a lot of insights into what do the values of the organization look like. And then also just talking about, like, how do you get things done, right? Like, tell me if I want to do X in this new role and take it from start to finish through execution, how would I have to approach that? And just hearing people talk through some of those things, I think you can probably get a good feel for the values of the organization, because everybody has their core values of the organization posted on their website or whatever. Yeah. But really digging into what does that actually look like?
What does that mean?
Yes, is important.
What are you reading? What are you listening to now? Where do you get new information about leadership?
One of my favorite podcasts, actually, is Entree Leadership. The podcasts are a little bit long, but there's a lot of different perspectives on leadership there. I still do TED Talks. I'm not reading as much as I used to. I think just because the podcasts and the audio make it so easy
to feed that same beast.
Yes. I really like John Gordon's books. If I'm going to read. One of my favorite books is The Energy Bus that he wrote.
Why? What strikes you about that as being helpful?
It just really talks about aligning the people that are on your bus with your level of energy. So coming from someone like me, and he talks about energy vampires and those that are going to suck the energy out of you as a leader, and how to get them off your bus, and how to invite more people on your bus that will give you energy. And he has a full series of books that talk about planting your seed in an organization, and how do you nurture that seed to help it grow and in yourself as a leader. And quite frankly, his books are short and sweet, so I can sit down in an evening and get through it, and then have some key takeaways. And I've used a lot of his books for team building.
Okay.
Just to help our teams come closer together and feel like there's more meaning in the work that they're doing.
One of the things I've heard people say about leadership is that you tend to get distracted with the energy vampires, the problem children in your organization, and you don't get to spend enough time developing, helping, nurturing, bring to fruition the good people in your organization. Does that strike you as a challenge that's important?
I think that the energy vampires can become a very big distraction. And sometimes that's happened to me at times in my career too, where I've focused way too much on them. And sometimes you can't avoid it at all. But in the situations that I can, I just try to just remove them as much as I possibly can. Only use them for what we need to get work done, and just not pay attention to all the noise that they bring to the table. That's not always possible, right? And then that's where the art of influence comes in, and how can you influence this person or people around them to make some changes. Okay. Yeah.
Is it ever the case that with an energy vampire, they're just not in the right seat and you need to move them out of the organization?
Yeah. I've had that situation before. It's not easy. Those are probably some of the darkest days as a leader, where, you have to let someone go because they're just not a fit. But in the long run, it's better for everybody. It's better for them. It's better for the team. People typically land on their feet unless they're complete deadbeats, right? Yeah. They'll land on their feet somewhere that might be a better fit for their personality.
I saw an interesting study that most people fired for cause find a new job at a higher salary than the job they were fired from.
Yeah.
Because I presume better fit.
Yeah.
You had mentioned that in those cases where there was alignment, it was both more fun and you were more successful.
Yeah.
Those two dots tend to connect? More fun, more successful?
Yes.
Why?
I think that if you truly love what you're doing and you like the people that you work with, and you wake up and you're having fun every day, you're just going to drive success harder. Because why wouldn't you? Like, if you wake up every day and you're like, ugh, I don't want to go to work. This is, it's boring. Like, you're not going to put as much passion and energy and work into the end goal as you will when you wake up and you're like, yay, I get to go work with these awesome people. We're doing fun things. It's a great culture. We're laughing together. We're crying together, but we're in it together, right?
What do you look for in a leader when you're looking to promote someone into the leadership ranks? What tells you that might make it?
A few things. Technically, from just a business standpoint, can they think strategically at a higher level? Or can I develop them to think strategically at a higher level? And then, but most important is I'm going to circle back to the care and the EQ, right? Will they genuinely care about the people around them and that are working for them? And what does their emotional intelligence look like? Because that's going to bleed into everything that they do, and they're not going to be effective if they don't have a high enough EQ to help them read the folks that they're working with, right? Whether that's around them, below them, or above them.
So are there folks that might come to you and express a desire to move into leadership that you would conclude this just isn't going to be a good fit? You really shouldn't be a leader. Yeah,
well, I don't. Again, we talked a little bit earlier that we think that leaders can be developed. So sometimes it's, maybe now is not the time, but here's some things that maybe we could work on. Or like I see where you might need some growth. This person might be a very good mentor for you, right? Based on their skill set and where you are today. So kind of pointing people in the direction to help them develop, but then they also have to own it. Okay. They have to grab a hold of that, take that feedback, whatever it is that you give them, and really work towards, okay, this is something I'm going to be very intentional about working towards so I can become a leader later in my career if I so choose to.
So you could tell someone, look, it's not right for you to be a leader now. Here are a couple things to work on. If you work on these, if you clear these hurdles, then moving forward, this might make sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's the most fun part about being a leader? What's cool?
Seeing folks that you invested in progress in their career. Like if I think about some of the folks that I impacted early in my leadership, right? One of them recently reached out to me on Facebook. I haven't talked to them in 12 years, right? And just said, hey, you said something to me in a meeting in whatever year, and it inspired me to do this. And because of what you said, it nudged me in this direction and I'm here today and I just wanted to say thank you. Like those are the moments that I think give me like the most satisfaction in as being a leader. Just seeing other people be successful just because you helped develop them or nudge them or gave them a little bit of advice that put them on a different trajectory that they might not have been on.
What would you say to an owner or someone up the organizational food chain that says, well, that all sounds nice, Bobbie, but we don't have you here so you can feel good about your impact on other people's lives. We have you here so we can make more money. So we can grow the organization.
Yeah. Well.
So you're not the kind of leader we want. We want one who's going to focus on.
Well, I want to grow the organization too, Dale. I'll just throw that out there because I want us to win. But here's what I'll say. Investing in the folks on your team and setting them up for success is ultimately going to lead to that top line growth that whoever up the chain is asking for. And that's really what matters is making sure that they're set up for success.
So I'm hearing that to be in some ways a great leader, you really need to own and genuinely care about the people who report to you, want to see them grow and develop, and that doing that is going to result in a more successful organization in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. Leadership right there in a nutshell. 5 seconds by Dale Feinauer.
Why did we need an hour podcast? I'm just summarizing what you said. Let me be clear on who owns those concepts. That was out of you, not me. Words of wisdom to young leaders coming up today. What as we're wrapping this up, what golden nuggets of thought might you put into the head of somebody who's thinking of or new to leadership?
I would say 2 things. One, self-awareness is super important. So figure out how you can discover who you truly are and what your derailers are. And then 2, work on your EQ. The technical skills, yeah, you have to have those. But as long as you have that foundation of whatever technical skills are in the craft that you're in, the people part of leadership is the most important piece, and it's the hardest part of business. And so if you master that, the sky's the limit, in my opinion.
Cool. Bobbie, thank you very much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Dale.
And if you're accurate that having fun and being productive are together, this was a great podcast because this was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun.
So I do thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me, Dale.
And we thank all of you for listening to us for another edition of It's Time Podcast brought to you by the College of Business Graduate Programs. Join us again for the next podcast. Thank you very much.
It's Time is a production of the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs in association with Venture Project Studios. Executive producer, Aaron J. Armstrong. Host, Professor Dale Feinauer. Creative Director, Madison Potratz. Director of Photography, Elazar Kloon. Audio and Video Editor, Elazar Kloon. Marketing Strategy, Tara Larson. Social Media, Anwar Mahana. A special thanks to L Creative, Top View Media, Michael Patton, and the University of Wisconsin-Oshkosh College of Business Graduate Programs.